Welcome back to esteemed viewers to another edition of God Manifold Wisdom. I'm Pastor Kevin Afaxon and it is a pleasure to have you. If it's your first time for tuning in, consider liking this video. You can also share it with a friend. You can subscribe to our channel. Check out the other videos in our channel. Hit the notification bell icon so that whenever we upload a new video, it may come your way. Today we want to look at a pertinent topic which we want to dig deep within and be able to be nourished thereby. The topic in question is why Jesus Christ of Nazareth was a black man and why he looked 50 years old, yet he was merely in his early 30s. I know you might be perplexed. What type of a topic is this? But let me tell you, don't press the dial. We're coming back after a short break.
Smart Sound.
Welcome once again to our viewers to our part 1 of this series, and the subtopic is why Jesus Christ of Nazareth was a black man. Allow me to quickly read a verse in the Bible. Join me very fast in reading this. I want to read 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 12, and I read, "Then spake Solomon, the Lord said that he will dwell in the thick darkness." Yes, friends, today, by the time we get to the close of this, we'll be able to understand why God said he will dwell in thick darkness. These were Solomon's utterances at the time whereby the temple of Solomon was being dedicated. And Solomon said, I've built this temple for God, but God said he will dwell in thick darkness. We'll be able to understand that categorically. Join me again in reading another verse in the Bible. Let us go to Isaiah chapter 53. I read verse 2 and verse 3. "For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form, no comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we shall desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not." Friends, we want to focus on verse 3 in these following words, that he was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Let us state from the onset that when you read Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7 to 8, and when you hear that Jesus learned obedience by the things that he suffered, we want to understand that the sufferings which are elucidated or the which is mentioned in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7 to 9, those were internal sufferings. Now, when we look at Isaiah chapter 53, verse 3, when he says he was a man of sorrow, acquainted with grief, we must understand that when we looked at Jesus, first of all, someone might wonder, did he really suffer? I'm talking about what you can consider to be outward suffering. Because if you look at the hours whereby we can say that he faced outward suffering, we will consider the time at Gethsemane when he was sweating blood, and probably the night when he was arrested, and the time when he was flogged, and also considering the hours he spent at Golgotha, having been crucified, and all those hours he spent until he gave up his ghost at 3 p.m. So if you cumulatively look at those hours, they look like a very short span of time that you can consider him suffering. Therefore, let us state categorically from the onset that if we want to look at that perspective, then he truly never suffered, as someone might want to qualify a man of sorrow acquainted with grief. Because when you look at that statement, a man of sorrow acquainted with the grief, it is to say that the person has been used, accustomed, acclimatized, probably even to the sorrows, to the grief. But the number of hours that we see Jesus suffering, considering outward suffering, are very few, if any. Besides, we must know that him ministering in a glorified body, and this is a seventh thunder message revelation, a glorified body does not feel any pain. Now, the question is, therefore, what was Prophet Isaiah speaking about in Isaiah chapter 53, verse 3, that Jesus Christ was a man of sorrow, acquainted with grief. Let us understand that that statement is an exposition to us that he, Jesus Christ, was a black man. We know that there is no race on earth whereby we find men and women of sorrow acquainted with grief. It is the black man that even has to suffer before he gets any potable drinking water. It is a black man who even has to spend hours walking and probably even looking for firewood before he can make a meal. It is a black man who, even before he can cover his nakedness, they must send to him second-hand clothes from Europe. It is a black man who even has to beg nature. He is begging everything. It is a black man. Black men and women are the men of sorrow, acquainted with grief. Therefore, that description in the prophecy of Isaiah chapter 53, verse 3, and which is directly related to Jesus, it is for us to understand that Isaiah was prophesying, and by that prophecy, it was giving a description that Jesus Christ, when he comes on the scene, he will be a black man. Let us not mince our words and repeat, Jesus Christ of Nazareth was a black man. We will find more undeniable proofs moving forward. Let us move forward and see something else which is also very interesting. We all know in the Bible, in Matthew chapter 27, verse 32, in Mark chapter 15, verse 21, and in Luke chapter 23, verse 26, we hear concerning Jesus Christ being taken to Golgotha, and he was carrying a very heavy cross. Then all of a sudden, those Roman soldiers, they just saw a man among the crowd, Simon of Cyrene, and they compelled him. The Bible says he was compelled to bear the cross of Jesus Christ. The question is, why was he compelled to bear the cross of Jesus Christ? This is the answer, which might be startling to a vast array of you, our viewers. Understand that Simon of Cyrene, according to Acts chapter 2, verse 10, is a region within Libya. And Libya, as we know it, is within Africa. And we saw, if you have seen our previous videos, that Africa is what was called Egypt. The entire Africa is what is called Egypt. That's why in Isaiah chapter 19, from verse 1 to 25, it talks about Egypt, talks about Africa. That was written 700 plus years before the birth of Christ. And the time of the birth of Christ, that is 1,884 plus years before Berlin Conference, when they put the lines of demarcation, whereby we have this territoriality so that we can have the country of Egypt. We say that the country of Egypt is not the Egypt spoken about in Isaiah 19, that the Egypt spoken about in Isaiah 19 is the entire African continent. Now, let us move forward. That Simon of Cyrene was a man, a black man from Libya, which is mentioned in Acts chapter 2, verse 10. We see that Cyrene is in Libya. Now, for this Simon of Cyrene to be compelled to bear the cross, it means that the Roman soldiers who were Caucasian, who originated from Japheth, they saw that he bore a striking semblance to Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ, being a black man, was resembling Simon of Cyrene being a black man. But the gist of the matter is this. Why was Simon of Cyrene told to bear? We have seen it's because he was a black man having a close semblance to Jesus Christ, who was also a black man. But what is the significance of that bearing of the cross by another black man, Simon of Cyrene? It is to show us that as the black man bore the ignominy or the shame of bearing the cross on the behalf of Jesus, in the dispensation of the fullness of time, which we see in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, that in the dispensation of the fullness of time, God will send forth his son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem those who are under the law. And when Jesus appeared in the dispensation of the fullness of time for the purpose of redemption, under the more excellent ministry, according to Hebrews chapter 8, verse 6, whereby he only authored the faith, according to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, just the first fold of it. And yet a black man was able also to bear the cross. Therefore, it shows that as the black man participated in the ignominy or the shame of the cross, therefore a black man must of necessity participate in the glory that is to follow. Let us understand, it is for this reason, that is why presently God has chosen Africa, the land of Ham. That's why God has chosen Africans, the Egyptians, the black men, to be the people who will be able to understand this ministry. Which ministry? The more excellent ministry, but now in its achievement stage. That is why it has started from Africa, even from Cameroon. It is the black men who can understand this ministry. These are just a few things which can be able to help us understand why Jesus Christ of Nazareth was a black man. It is no wonder that Solomon said, surely God says, his dwelling will be in thick darkness. There's a lot we could say in this edition, but I feel what has already been said will suffice. Thank you for joining us in this edition of God Manifold Wisdom channel. It's a pleasure to have you. Lest you forget, consider subscribing to this channel, like this video, share it to a friend, and click the notification bell icon so that whenever we upload a new video, it may come your way. Thank you and be blessed.